So, welcome everyone. I'm delighted that you've joined us for today's MTI Research Snaps webinar, From TikTok to Transit, Storytelling for Emerging Mobility. My name is Dr. Hillary Nixon, and I am the Deputy Executive Director, at the Mineta Transportation Institute at San Jose State University. MTI's mission is to increase mobility for all by improving the safety, efficiency, accessibility, and convenience of our nation's transportation system. We accomplish this through surface transportation research, technology transfer, education, and workforce development. MTI currently leads two competitively selected multi-university consortia. In today's webinar, we explore how to effectively address concerns, communicate advantages, and foster trust across communities when it comes to emerging technologies using innovative storytelling strategies. Our speaker today is Dr. Billy Riggs, a professor at the University of San Francisco School of Management and director of the Autonomous Vehicles and the City Initiative. He is a global expert on automated mobility and future transportation, urban technology, transport economics and business models, and sustainable urban development in the face of climate change. He is the author of two books, most recently, End of the Road, Reimagining the Street as the Heart of the City. Dr. Riggs has been a fellow with the National Science Foundation and currently sits on the Transportation Research Board's Committee on Roadside Landscape and Environmental Design, Operations, and Maintenance. Billy, welcome. We are so glad to have you. We're recording this webinar, and the link to view will be available shortly on our website and social media pages. Thank you, Billy, for taking the time to be with us today. I turn things over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Hillary. And I'm so glad to be here with all my friends at Mineta Transportation Institute and excited to share this because it's been really fun and a learning experience for me. So we're going to launch right into TikTok transit and storytelling for emerging mobility and automated mobility. So thanks for joining us, everyone, and send your questions in live to Alvarina and Hillary. I think she's going to put some resources in. So just to kind of start out, I think one of the things that I want to emphasize is, why does this matter? Hillary and my colleagues at the Automated Vehicles in the City Initiative have thought a lot about kind of new mobility, EVs, AVs, micromobility, mobility as a service. Why does it matter? We have to stop think about the future in terms of how we educate the public, how we think about public trust, and particularly how we think about not eroding public trust. And as digital marketing increases and digital marketing ever changes, and we are increasingly reliant on these things called cell phones, we have to kind of evolve the way we speak, and I'm just as guilty as everyone of transportation speak. I would say WONK talk is speaking in acronyms as a planner and transportation engineer. So given that I have two young kids and that I am constantly learning new lingo, that was kind of the origin of this project, and it was really kind of how do we distill things down to kind of educational nuggets, and those can be in very different formats, and so it was really just kind of, can we think of new educational tools to think about new mobility? And so we started off with just kind of some ideas about shifting consumer preferences on transport, and thinking about marketing, and why do consumers hesitate in their perceptions of transportation? And some of that can be on safety, reliability, cost and infrastructure concerns, and a lack of understanding of real world use cases. And I think when it comes down to it, some solutions are to show real world use cases, to show demonstration projects, and we've seen that happening around the world, but also to kind of show influencers. And I'm going to show some examples of that, and to show storytelling. And that can be long form and short form. But we've increasingly seen short form snackable content. So bite-sized content become the trend in our media. And I think, I'll say it because I've been repeating this, and I was just at a conference the other day, and I told somebody that I see LinkedIn becoming the new professional form of Instagram. That I think that it's important that kind of we think of these 15-second sound bites as being how we engage our audience, and moving to these quick and engaging ways of reaching audiences. So when we think about even engaging our professional audiences, thinking about 15 to 60-second explainers. Whether or not you're using Twitter or X, thinking about data insights in terms of discussion threads, looking at YouTube shorts that maybe lead to longer explainer educational content. So short form videos that go to longer form educational content. But also looking at, and I'm a glass half full kind of person, I'm going to tell you that, but looking at, can you create fun and memes and gifs that actually encourage engagement in some of your more dense content? And I think, planners and engineers, we love our dense content. We love our knowledge, but can we create gateways to knowledge? And I think that's important to really emphasize, that there's room for pith. There's room for that dense knowledge, but also if we can create gateways to that, that's really important. And then we can do testing on that. We can do various ways of tracking metrics. We can create, and I think that's where we can use young people to do various A/B testing on that, and that's where we think it's very important. And we found in our report, you can look at that. We provide suggestions on data-driven marketing and looking at A/B testing, where you can actually look at creating 10-second clips versus 30-second clips, comparing different message, for example, safety versus sustainability versus convenience. And also looking at geo-targeting. Can you actually look at like one geography versus another? Could you change your message in a peri-urban area versus an urban area? And that could be one strategy you might use in terms of your transportation strategy. So there's all different kinds of methods you might do to do targeted marketing. And I think that's really important also for channel. You might actually think about how you might use multiple channels to to educate, to establish trust, and to leverage how you might combine your educational content with your with influencers, with events, but also with actual physical collateral that you might hand out to create consumer awareness. Because it's not all just digital, it can be phygital. You can actually it's important you have a consistent brand across all of what you're doing. So let's dive into some actual content now. And that's where I want to actually show you kind of what's out there and lead to some actual conclusion. And I know I've kept this snappy. There's going to be a lot of resources that you can use. This is a Mineta research snap, so we keep it really quick. What are influencers actually doing? I've got here on the right side of your screen some stuff that Kurt Kolstad from 99% Invisible did out there in featuring some stuff in Minneapolis. He was going out and showing some projections on some snow in Minneapolis as kind of a feature, an educational feature. Now, is this novel? Interesting, novel. But what he was doing, he was explaining in common language, hey, this is cool. He was doing this on TikTok. He was actually doing this as kind of a micro influencer in a niche and expert area, kind of doing it in short form, storytelling way, but he captured attention in 3 seconds, walking over a snoring environment in a storytelling way. This was a great example of a best practice with this, like a city planning influencer telling a story. So best practicing, partnering with a city planner, engaging in kind of a short explainer, and using this idea of a hook, looking at emotionally driven stuff, but also looking at kind of user engaged content. Is there something that you can do to encourage real people? So I'm going to show you a couple other examples. one thing that Lime, for example, has done recently, harnessing a lot of celebrities. Here we have none other than Harry Styles out there on a Lime bike, and we've seen this numerous times with numerous celebrities. We're going to come back to this Lime examples, lifestyle branding, looking at thought leadership, looking at business to business relationships. We're going to come back to that. Looking at cross-sectional deep versus light YouTube educational pieces. So having a light YouTube piece and then going into an in-depth YouTube piece. But also, and I think one of the vehicles I see is really interesting is longitudinal podcasts. And I think we've seen really people do deep engagement with podcasts. I think that's a really interesting way to do long form educational and behind the scenes investigation of what's happening. And we see that happening. I think LA Metro has done a really interesting podcast series, as well as SFMTA recently. So lots of opportunity there for platform specific strategies. 4 examples I'm going to highlight. It's a little bit mashed up of a slide, but Lime had a very interesting, in addition to kind of capturing again Timothy Shams, T. Shams, again on a bike, but a very interesting breakup with your cars strategy. But Waymo has a very interesting Let's Talk Self-Driving campaign, talking with Dua Lipa and or Ludacris and Missy Ella in a ludicrous ride. But also really doing some awareness on those with blind and low vision in their Let's Talk Self-Driving campaign. There's been some interesting work, again, with SFMTA in co-branding the local soccer team. And actually, we cite in our report how LA Metro did the same thing with the LA Galaxy. But this is interesting. SFMTA did a really interesting beer crawl last year, and it was co-branded with the local soccer team. So check that out in our report. And actually, you can check that out on my own Instagram site. So big fun. But I want to point to this Amtrak video because it actually is a really good example. You can find a link in the report because it's one of the first brain rot videos that I was able to find. And it's actually fashioned after a Royal Rumble kind of monster truck series where the train comes and crushes a bag of chips in a stadium. And it's so cool. What is brain rot? Well, it is a style, and it is a style that your kids may know. Brain rot is typically kind of this idea of overexposed or trivial content. It was the Oxford Word of the Year last year. Let me tell you, I don't understand it. It is not of my generation, but we have, as a part of this project, produced a bunch of videos in this genre as an example. They are all focused on this autonomous vehicle area as an educational example of what is possible. The idea is to push the envelope of, can we produce content that is radical to reach different audiences and educate them? You can check them out on the MTI website. There are other strategies to look at. I have this picture here on the right because BDG in Berlin even went as far as partnering with Adidas on a pair of shoes that was the actual train ticket. Can you believe that? I love this example, and this wasn't even recently. This pair ticket was the actual transit ticket. It's like one of my favorite examples of branding and marketing and partnering with a company, co-branding. So our concluding lessons, I think at the end of the day, make it quick, make it relational, look for short form video and clips. You have to make quick cuts and looking at humor and frequent repetition of themes is kind of the new trend. But at the end of the day, I think it's also important that you stick to your own brand. I think you can't depart from your own content. You have to have consistency and narrative and voice and link to your other strategies. It has to be digital, physical, and in person. And I would caution folks that you have to make accurate claims and disclosures. You have to disclose I would disclose regularly and encourage transparency. And also, complying with consumer protection regulation and your local privacy and consumer protection laws, whether or not that's GDPR in Europe, or if you're, for example, in California, we have pretty strict PII regulations, and so comply with those. So with that said, I think we're going to have a discussion now. I hope I've gone quickly enough so we have ample time to answer your questions and have a good discussion, Hillary. So I'm going to stop my share, and hopefully we can have an awesome dialogue, Hillary.
Thank you so much, Billy. And we've dropped in the links to that Amtrak video you referenced, as well as the link to the report page, which has got some examples of Billy's brain rot videos and some of the things that you've done. So please feel free to put in questions that you might have into the Q&A feature, but we do have some that were submitted earlier. And Billy, one of the very first things you talked about at the beginning of your presentation was shifting consumer perceptions as it relates to transportation. So what do you think is actually the most important mindset shift that transportation leaders need to make when they think about communicating about emerging technologies and or modernizing their communications approach?
Well, I think one of the, I think people want quick bite-sized communication. I mean, I think particularly the young people, they're looking for humor and they want quick scrolling, quick access humor. And it's funny is like when you sit on a plane these days, look at what people are doing next to you. And I don't even think it's young people. I was sitting on a plane yesterday returning from a conference, and I looked over and I'm pretty sure I could gauge that this person was in their mid 30s and they were scrolling on TikTok. And I don't even think I'm pretty sure that we can say that it's not just young people. So, I think that uh, people do get their information largely, and they do get a lot of information in rapid succession on these type of tools. And I think that's an opportunity for transportation professionals to capture, capture eyeballs. And so I think it's a gateway. And I think I saw some comments in the chat about how car companies have been engaging with selling
Yeah.
products. And thank you, John Niles. That's a good comment. I mean, I think one of the things that I talk to people a lot about in the public transit field is that public transit professionals very unfortunately we don't think of public transit passengers very rarely. We think of our passengers as customers, but maybe we many times think of them as stakeholders or citizens. But maybe we should start thinking of them as people that we should sell a product to.
Yeah,
And
I
I
was
know
going to
that's
say
heresy. Yeah, and so but maybe we should actually say, hey, we've got a great product, and our product actually will work for you at these times, and here's when it and that's what I see in this Amtrak thing, is that they're basically saying, here's when our product is most awesome. It's on the weekend and it will crush the opposition. And it's actually a really compelling video.
So I related to this, I guess, kind of expanding the conversation. This came from a question that was submitted earlier. And I'm going to say this is something I'm curious about as well. I don't know how to get started. Like, what are you explored this? You yourself said, hey, I didn't know much about this. I had these young kids who are looking at all this stuff. For someone who doesn't do a lot of videos, who doesn't necessarily maybe think like this, how do you get started? How do I convince the agencies that I work with to do more of this stuff? What are some baby steps?
Yeah, you say what the lambda 6 7 I I think first off, I think we have to acknowledge that we have to become, first off, you have to say, I'm going to experiment. And, I think that we have to own that we have to become experimenters. But I think the first thing is that as managers and as senior planners, if you're a senior planner out there and you're saying that I'm really interested in this topic, I would advise you as a senior planner or as a planning manager, find that champion in your organization. And I say this because one thing that when we were doing research at Cal Poly and early in my career, we had a paper and then it was on planning web technology, and we found the most innovative web enabled organizations in the country who had kind of the most innovative web technologies were those organizations that actually had the technology champions in their organizations. And I think that still holds. If you can find that young person, that organization who will be the champion in your organization. And so I do think it takes someone who will be the individual in your organization who's going to champion this topic, because I think it's hard as a manager to and someone who doesn't understand it to do it. So I
Mhm.
don't think you can personally own it and you can personally understand it. I candidly, Hillary, I think it's hard to learn. I've tried to play around with these things and I still don't totally get it. But also I think you can learn it and you can fumble through it, but
So
it's also something that you can start to embed in your organization by enabling people in your organization. And that's what I would say. Find the champions in your
I
organization.
get it. I hear what you're saying. Find the champion and then hire a team as an intern, maybe. But
Yeah, I mean,
I
I
want,
think that's, yeah, find the young
yep,
people, find the people that are passionate about this in your organization and then
love it.
empower them.
So we've got a question that was submitted, comes from Heidi, and when we think about, she asks, how can we use these new communication tools to make public transit? So thinking specifically about public agencies more attractive. And you had I think it was a Waymo example with some celebrities. We had Dua Lipa and Missy Elliott and Ludacris. But are we gonna, BART, VTA, LA Metro? Are we gonna start hiring some celebrities, or what are some other things that we could think about making transit more fun, more attractive? So.
Well, the funny part is, uh, I was thinking, I don't know if LeBron James would have a problem taking his photo on LA Metro. I would I don't know. I think, um, I don't, I don't know the answer to that, but I think that, if we're gonna start to, kind of really kind of, um, kind of empower, or kind of really put energy behind the kind of getting put energy behind kind of our messaging. We can really, I think we can get creative, and maybe it's just, there's some international TV stations I mark where they just kind of stalk people with a phone. So they run after people and they do kind of clandestine marketing. So maybe it's just kind
Mhm.
of running after people with a cell phone and say, "How often do you take BART?" Or
Yeah.
"How
Well,
often do you take trains?" So
I
it could
I
be
love
any
the
number
uh,
of creative strategies.
I
Um,
love that you mentioned Bart, because Mel reminded me, and there was recently almost a little bit of a controversy with Bart, and there not so much with Bart, but with another um company that was using some of those more creative, innovative Bart merchandising approaches, but they hadn't
that's
made a
right.
partnership.
That's
So
right.
I'm
That's right.
wondering if we can actually start thinking about how do we as agencies, transit agencies, the Adidas example you showed, kind of create some of those brand
Those
partnerships.
revenue partnerships. Yeah, I mean, I think. Well, I think this leads into kind of some other. I think there are. If we kind of extended this topic, I mean, marketing and there are marketing and revenue opportunities, I believe, that we haven't tapped into when we really kind of, if we extend kind of this idea to kind of the revenue opportunities that are untapped into. I think there are revenue opportunities in this space that are untapped into. And one idea I have, for example, is that in a lot of major markets, um, we have airline hubs in the United States, and there are opportunities for airline partnerships, for example, to load bags for people in the trains, and potentially to do concierge airline services where you actually partner with regional transit agencies and encourage people to have a concierge airline service that is bundled with transit. So you actually could
Mhm.
bundle the transit ticket with the airline ticket. Maybe you actually sell the transit ticket with the airline ticket. And you know what? This is done in Europe, and
Mm,
why not
interesting.
start to do it here?
Yeah.
Think about
One
doing this in
stop.
Baltimore. You could do this in Baltimore. You could actually sell this to BWI, and I actually
No.
think it would sell really well.
So I want to pivot just slightly because Joel brought up a comment when he was talking about the Amtrak um, example and this idea of it 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 was informative, but it started to use this brain rot style, but it wasn't alienating to older generations. And we were talking about this, Billy, you and I, before we started the webinar, is how do we use some of these more outrageous, innovative, maybe sometimes from someone's perspective, maybe a little offensive marketing approaches and not alienate some of our other customers.
Well, you know, I, it's funny is I didn't I don't know that, so first off, I when I first saw the kind of when my students first presented the brain rot style to me, I don't know that I'm gonna just kind of put this out there. I don't know that I thought it was weird, that alienating. I just thought it was weird, and I didn't understand it. So I'm just gonna say that I just don't understand it. Sorry, kids. Sorry. And but I want to say I respect it, and I think it's very interesting. And I want to say now that I get it, I want I love that we can, and I like Joel. I thank you for that comment, and I actually like the fact that we can adopt some of the vehicles and enrich it with information. We can adopt some of the style, and we can actually use it to enrich it and make it more informative. So I think that's one way where we can make a more hybrid or blended approach that actually blends an informative or educational style. And I think I said this in my earlier talk, is that you can create gateways to more informative information. Um,
Mhm.
but I also think I was telling you earlier before we got on that I do think that we have traditionally done a really good job at educating educating people in with print media. We've done a very good job at educating me in a more traditional lecture style, in a more traditional webinar style. I think the challenge still is that we do long form talks. Our
Mm.
we don't do quick cuts. We don't have this. It's that people are still expecting fast moving, more energetic splices between cuts, more interactive type of film strategies. And in our report, we actually even have cinematography. Some cinematography type suggestions at the very end, where my students have gone and classified some of the ways that even commercials are filmed. And I think
No.
there's some examples there that if you're team is going out and actually they actually went in and even looked at how Spike Jones was filming some Doritos
Ah,
commercials, for example.
oh, interesting.
And I think that's there's some examples on what you might think about when you're actually going out and doing some of your transportation marketing.
All right. Well, Billy, I think that is a great way to wrap this up. Encourage everyone to take a look at the report. Billy, thank you so much for joining us today. Some great additional examples and resources with the report and on the website. And one last note before we go, please join us. We have another event coming up Tuesday, November 4th, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. It is virtual, it's free. It is about connecting for your career, an introduction to professional associations in transportation. It introduces university students, emerging professionals to transportation organizations that offer networking, professional development opportunities, and or scholarship opportunities. We hope to see you there or share that resource with your network. Thank you, Billy. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.